For early life on Earth, oxygen was poison. The gas we breathe today, the one that keeps every animal on this planet alive, once threatened to destroy life itself. For more than 1 billion years, life on Earth was simple, tiny, microscopic, cells without nuclei, organisms that lived in a world completely without oxygen. These early microbes were anaerobic. That word simply means they lived without oxygen. Their chemistry depended on it. To them, oxygen wasn't useful. It was toxic. They drew their energy from chemical reactions: hydrogen, sulfur, iron, the slow geological engine of the planet itself. And for hundreds of millions of years, that system worked. Life spread through the oceans, quietly, almost invisibly. The world was stable. Microbial communities covered ancient shorelines. The oceans were rich with dissolved iron. The atmosphere held almost no oxygen at all. Then one group of microbes evolved something new, a way to use sunlight as energy. These organisms are called cyanobacteria, and they discovered a powerful new form of photosynthesis. Instead of using sulfur or other chemicals, they used water. And when water is split during this reaction, oxygen is released. At first, it didn't seem like much, just a waste gas, released by tiny microbes in shallow seas. But oxygen is extremely reactive. It immediately began binding with iron in the oceans, slowly turning vast amounts of dissolved iron into rust. Geologists can still see the evidence today: layered rock formations called banded iron formations. The fossil record of oceans slowly filling with oxygen. But eventually, the oceans couldn't absorb any more, and oxygen began to escape into the atmosphere. What happened next would transform the chemistry of the entire planet and trigger one of the most profound biological crises Earth has ever seen. This is the story of the Great Oxygenation Event, the first known mass extinction on Earth. To understand why oxygen caused a crisis, we have to understand the world that existed before it. More than 3 billion years ago, Earth looked very different. No forests, no animals, no birds in the sky. The atmosphere contained almost no oxygen. Instead, it was made mostly of nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and small amounts of gases like methane. The oceans were different too. They were rich in dissolved iron, a metal that easily reacts with oxygen, but at this time, there was no oxygen to react with. Life already existed, but it was entirely microbial, single-celled organisms known as prokaryotes. Prokaryotes are the simplest kind of cells. They have no nucleus, no internal compartments. Their genetic material simply floats inside the cell. These microbes powered their lives using chemistry. Some drew energy from hydrogen and carbon dioxide. Others used sulfur or iron in their metabolism. Metabolism is the set of chemical reactions that keep a cell alive. Early life relied entirely on these chemical energy sources. No sunlight required. Across the planet's shallow seas, microbial communities formed dense layers. These were called microbial mats, entire ecosystems built from microscopic life. Some of these mats trapped sediment and slowly built layered structures known as stromatolites. They are among the oldest visible fossils on Earth. For hundreds of millions of years, this microbial world remained stable. Life evolved, it diversified, but it remained microscopic. And all of it depended on one crucial fact: there was no oxygen in the environment. But deep in those shallow seas, some microbes were about to change that. Sometime before 2.7 billion years ago, a group of microbes evolved a new way to survive. These organisms are known as cyanobacteria. They are still alive today, and they changed the history of our planet. Cyanobacteria perform photosynthesis. That means they use energy from sunlight to power the chemical reactions that keep their cells alive. Earlier photosynthetic bacteria already existed, but most of them used substances like hydrogen sulfide instead of water. Those reactions did not produce oxygen. Cyanobacteria did something different. They used water as the source of electrons for photosynthesis. And when water is split during that reaction, oxygen is released. A water molecule contains two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom. During oxygenic photosynthesis, the oxygen atoms combine to form O2 gas, the same oxygen we breathe today. At first, this oxygen didn't seem important. It was simply released into the surrounding water as a waste product. But cyanobacteria were incredibly successful. They formed massive colonies across the shallow oceans, layer upon layer of microbial life. Some of those colonies built the structures we call stromatolites, living microbial communities trapping sediment and growing upward over time. From the perspective of those microbes, nothing dramatic had happened. They had simply discovered a new energy source. But something invisible was beginning to accumulate in the oceans, a gas that most life on Earth had never encountered before. That gas was oxygen. And oxygen is one of the most chemically reactive gases in nature, and the oceans were about to respond. At this point in Earth's history, the oceans contained enormous amounts of dissolved iron that had slowly washed out of volcanic rock over millions of years. Without oxygen in the environment, that iron remained dissolved in the water, invisible, floating freely through the ancient seas. But cyanobacteria were now releasing oxygen into those same oceans, and oxygen reacts very easily with iron. When oxygen meets dissolved iron, a chemical reaction occurs. The iron oxidizes. In simpler terms, it rusts. Instead of remaining dissolved, the iron becomes iron oxide, rust, the same substance you see on an old piece of steel. These rust particles slowly sank through the water column. Layer by layer, they settled onto the ocean floor, across vast regions of the planet. Over millions of years, these deposits built enormous rock layers, alternating bands of iron oxide and sediment. Today we call these rocks banded iron formations. They are among the most important geological records of Earth's early history. These formations tell us something remarkable. The oceans were absorbing massive amounts of oxygen, all of it reacting with iron before it could reach the atmosphere. For a very long time, the planet was able to hide the oxygen, but cyanobacteria never stopped producing it, year after year, generation after generation. Eventually, the oceans reached a limit. The iron was running out, and when that happened, the oxygen had nowhere left to go, except into the atmosphere. For millions of years, the oceans absorbed the oxygen produced by cyanobacteria. The iron reacted with it. The planet buffered the change. But that process could not continue forever. The supply of dissolved iron in the oceans was slowly being used up. Eventually, the oxygen had nothing left to react with, and it began escaping from the oceans into the atmosphere. For the first time in Earth's history, oxygen began to accumulate in the air. This transformation is known as the Great Oxygenation Event. It began roughly 2.4 billion years ago. At first, the increase was small, but chemically, it changed everything. Oxygen is a powerful oxidizing gas. That means it easily reacts with other molecules, sometimes violently. For organisms adapted to an oxygen-free world, this gas was extremely dangerous. Their cells had never evolved defenses against it. Oxygen can damage proteins. It can break apart delicate molecules inside the cell. It can interfere with metabolism itself. What cyanobacteria released as a simple byproduct was becoming an environmental toxin for most life on Earth. For the first time since life began, the planet itself was becoming hostile to the organisms that lived on it. What followed was one of the greatest biological crises in Earth's history, the first mass extinction As oxygen levels continued rising, large portions of the microbial biosphere began to disappear. Many species simply could not adapt fast enough. Some organisms escaped by retreating into environments where oxygen could not easily reach them. Deep sediments, subsurface rocks, hydrothermal vent systems. Even today, many anaerobic microbes still live in these environments. They are distant descendants of the ancient organisms that once dominated the planet. For life that depended on an oxygen-free world, this transformation was catastrophic. The Great Oxygenation Event reshaped the biosphere. Many early lineages vanished. Others survived only in isolated pockets. But while oxygen was deadly to much of early life, it also created entirely new possibilities, and some organisms were about to learn how to use it. The air we breathe today exists because of those ancient microbes. But when oxygen first appeared, it nearly ended life on Earth. Sometimes the events that reshape a planet begin with something almost invisible. For more about early life on Earth, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell. This has been For What It's Worth.